That doesn't sound good. Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started now. Thank you for all being here tonight, and welcome to the January 19th, thinking too far ahead, the December 19th meeting of the North Andover School Committee. We're glad to be here at Kittredge School today. Our first order of business today is the Pledge of Allegiance, so would everyone please stand? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so this is a special night for us, but this is a regular scheduled meeting, so we do have some business to get to. So we're going to go through a few things real quick. The first order of business is public comment. We'll also have public comment at the end of the meeting if you want to wait till then, which is fine. Great. Nothing on recognition, Dr. Gilligan?
No, we do have some coming up, but they could not make this evening.
Okay. Quickly, to the consent agenda, approval of minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from our last school committee meeting as presented in the packet.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Mabley, second by Ms. Lynch. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, 4-0. Okay. Our next order of business is our student report from the high school. Eamon.
All right, good evening. Is this? Yeah. Okay, so seeing as it's the holiday season, there are a plethora of fundraisers and sort of giving drives going on. Some of them include Operation Donation, which we discussed last meeting, and it's a drive by the Student Council to collect money and gifts from the student population in order to give them out to those in need in communities around the North Shore area. Another fundraiser going on is the Interact Club is having this sock drive as well as a care package drive, which consists of things like toiletries, blankets, scarves, any sort of thing you may need for the holidays, for the winter. And really what they're trying to do is capitalize on this season of giving in order to collect as many donations as they can to give it to those who are in need. Additionally, with fundraisers, the class of 2021, as I discussed last time a little bit, had their babysitting fundraiser, and that raised about $300 for the class. It was fairly successful, and it was really great to see many members of the community come out and help by providing their children, if you will, for us to babysit, and we had a blast. It was fantastic.
Great.
The coffee house, which was originally scheduled for the 15th of November, has been pushed to tomorrow. Hopefully will end up becoming a successful fundraiser for the North Andover Music Department. And there are many acts planned. I believe it's going to start around 6:30, and there's, the 3 hours are jam-packed with people and with performances. The band concert tonight is going on over at the high school. It's going to begin within the next hour or so, I believe. And the theme is holiday music, so there'll be all sorts of, seasonal tunes being played, and hopefully that goes successfully, though some of my band friends are less than confident in the amount of practice they've had over the past couple of days. Student ambassadors, in order to get the school into the holiday spirit, decorated the cafeteria with, wrapping paper going up the posts that are in the middle of the caf, all sorts of Christmas lights, all sort of various holiday paraphernalia in order to make the school feel more welcoming and more homely. Today, if you didn't know, was the DECA regional competition at Merrimack College. And if you don't know, DECA is a youth business competition which promotes the learning and application of business ideas in order to try and get more involvement from youth in business at a younger age. And it was a hugely successful day. 200 students went to Merrimack College, including 15 faculty members as well. And it ended up that close to 100 students, I believe, placed, which means they get to move on to the state competition. And should they place at the state competition for their selective category, they will end up going to the national competition, which is in Orlando in April. And then since it's winter and since winter sports have begun, there are some sports scores that I can tell you about. As Mr. Teresi, I know you love the sports.
I do.
So So far, the boys basketball team is 0-1. They had a
I don't like
tough
that.
loss last week. Girls basketball is 1-0. Boys hockey team is 1-1, and the girls hockey team is 1-0. Boys swim team is 0-1, and the wrestling team is 1-2. So mixed results, but hopefully we'll end up with better results as the season goes on. That's all I have for you. Do you have any questions?
Well, first of all, where's Jack and Mika?
Jack is at the Boys and Girls Club Florence, holiday dinner type thing.
Yeah.
And Mika, I believe, had to work tonight.
Okay. Well, if we can stick around for a couple minutes, would you mind? Just stick around for a couple minutes? All right, so here we are at the Kittredge School. I'm a proud alumni. I think I graduated, 40 years ago. I think there's another alumni from the Kittredge School in the audience as well. But we've done these kind of road shows for the last couple of years, and this is our first visit to Kittredge School. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cushing to do a quick introduction and a couple songs, but you need to stay put for, I don't know if you need to stay put right there. Yeah, just stay put there, that's fine. Go ahead. Mr. Cushing.
Yes, well, welcome to Kittredge Elementary School, and I was not the principal at the time, was I?
No, you were not.
But welcome, and we're really proud and happy to present some of the things that we do here at Kittredge Elementary School. And we have some of our raisins and guitar club to do a couple of songs for you tonight. First song that we're going to do is we have a couple of young women here who are going to introduce it for us. Could you let us know what that is?
Good evening, my name is Sophia Steele and my name is Millie Goslin. And the Raisins and I are going to perform a song for you all. The first song is Lean on Me. It's dedicated to Mr. Cushing because he put a lot of time and effort so we can practice for you all tonight.
All right. All right.
Girls, thank you very much.
The second song is dedicated to two special people in this room tonight. We all hope that you enjoy our performance.
Okay, so we'll go on three. Is everybody ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long. I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride. If I have things you need to borrow, for no one can fill those of your needs that you don't let show. So just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'd understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long. I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. So just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'd understand. We all need somebody to lean on. If there's a load you have to bear that you can't carry, I'm right up the road. I'll share your load. If you just call me, lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to
dedicated to two people who are in the room right now. And I guess they share the same birthday, not the same year. So Dr. Gilligan, the next song is for you. And Amen. Thank you very much. Okay? So, are we ready, guys? Okay, let's start on 3. And people can join us if you want. I think you might know the words.
Mandatory.
You ready? Okay, but I just want to say that when we get to the first happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear, we practiced Zeb. Is that okay?
That's fine. That's fine with you, Mr. Cushing.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, are we ready? Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Zeb. Happy birthday to you.
Here we come. Come at you.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Amen. Happy birthday to you.
Amen. Get your balloon.
Mr. Cushing, thank you so much. And I want to point out that Eamon was my top assistant when I was principal at Thompson School, literally. He was my assistant out on the playground in the morning. So every year we had a song together where we would hold the flag together. So how appropriate tonight. And happy birthday, Eamon, and thank you to the Raisinets.
Yep.
Well done.
Congrats on it.
The next Amen could be among us right now. Amen, congratulations. Thanks, Amen. Thanks. Good sport. Happy birthday. Have fun. Thanks. Okay. Thank you for those wonderful songs. That's a good way to start. So, Dr. Gilligan, we'll put it to you now to introduce our presentations for the night, I guess? Or is
Yep,
that
absolutely. I'm going to turn it over to Lorraine in a second. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming, and thank you to the students who have come out tonight. As always, the most important thing we do in schools is teaching and learning. And the last few years, we've had the ability to visit schools and have the kids here. So thanks for coming. Thanks for folks for coming early. And ST Math is something that started out where we got substantial grant funding. And it's really a big enhancement and enrichment to our program of Eureka Math. And I'm going to turn it over to Miss Lorene Marks, the Assistant Superintendent, to introduce the team. And they can take it from there.
All right, good evening, and thank you for being here. Oh, these aren't working anyway, right?
No.
I'm going to try to project my voice. I'm not that loud.
different than...
So I'd like to introduce our STEM director, Cara Larcombe. So Cara, raise your hand so people know who you are. And then our new math coach, Jen Hudak. And then we have 2 teachers here, Katie Barnett and Kim Horden, who are here with their students. So we have students from 1st, 3rd, and 5th grade, and we're going to demonstrate some of the ST Math work. And I think along with our STEM coordinator, we're going to look at some of the robotics work that our students do. So I'm going to let them take it from here. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So thank you all for being here. We have some 1st graders and 5th graders, and you're welcome to come over this way to see what they're actually working on. We're going to bring the microphone around so that people can see that as well. We'll also have one of our 3rd graders up at the computer, and you can watch on the big screen. So if you can't see close, our audience can still see up on the big screen. So we're going to come over to our 1st graders and see, and 3rd graders, you can hop into that puzzle. So they're working through a whole bunch of different puzzles. Are you working on the same puzzle or different puzzles? Different puzzles. Do sometimes you see one that your friend has already done? And you said, oh, I've done that one. And sometimes you say, oh, I haven't gotten there yet. All right.
Pass this. I'm working.
That's perfect.
I'm working on the 14th castle. And I'm on 41%. And if you go in, I'm starting at the 3rd level. And I'm on motherships groups. So when you get in here, you have to do that, and then you have to correct it. I'm going to pass this level.
Is there something you love about ST Math?
Even though it's a video game, I like video games, and it also helps you learn numbers.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Do you want to share, Shay?
What do I say?
What's something that you love about ST Math?
I like that when you get on higher levels, it gets harder, and you
Do you give up?
no. What do you do? I just when I go back, I get a little mad at first, and I don't get mad.
Good, right? Because sometimes you make a mistake, and is it okay to make a mistake?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you try it again. Good. Thank you, Shay. All right, Kathy.
I like to get on higher levels.
Awesome. Are they easy?
Hard.
They're hard, right? Do they help
Some
you
of
learn
them.
some math, though? Yeah, and you keep working through it? Awesome. All right, how about you, Will?
I don't know what to say.
No, do you want to tell us what's on your screen? What puzzle you're on? Do you want to talk about swaps? No. You did great. You did great. You're doing great. Awesome. It's a lot of fun, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. How about Patrick? Patrick's deep in thought in that level. Do you want to share a little bit what you're working on, Patrick? Patrick, do you want to talk about how the levels get harder?
I'm working on ice caves, and it's really hard.
It's really. And what level of ice caves are you on?
The 7.
The 7th, that last level, right? So sometimes you have like 1 or 2 levels, but sometimes you have 7 or 8 levels,
Yeah.
and they get harder as they go up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Anybody want to share anything else? You did a great job. Thank you.
Ms. Larkham, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm a year older, and I don't hear as well as I used to. So, I really appreciate the microphone, because we've done it in other places. I think we've learned. I certainly could hear the students, and it was awesome. But could you just recap a little bit about, in a nutshell, what are we looking at, what they're doing?
Yep. And we'll get into a lot more detail, too. We have a couple slides to show you those pieces. So a lot of what the students have shared is that it gets harder, but it helps them learn the math. James was sharing that it's kind of like a game, and he likes playing video games, but it's a very different game because he's learning math as he goes through it and learning all about numbers. And they're already in first grade persevering through that. They might make a mistake, they might lose a Gigi. So Gigi is the little penguin that you're probably seeing going across the screen, right? The goal, what's the goal?
To try to get him all the way across the screen and get 100%.
Good, right? Work up to 100%. So you can see at the bottom of the screen, shows the percentage. And how many Gigi lives do we get? 2 Gigi lives, right? And sometimes if you get...
Sometimes you can get 3, but it's rare.
It's rare, yep. If you're on a really hard level, sometimes you get 3, yep, and going through. So they're really interacting. Are there any words in ST Math? No, right? So that's another advantage for our first graders, that the language is removed from it. So lots of visual.
Like math problems, you gotta pass like with reading. You just gotta figure it out.
You figure it out. Good. Awesome. So we have some 5th graders. They're going to share a little bit of a challenge puzzle. Do you guys want to come up and show them how that challenge puzzle works? So we're going to flip-flop from our 3rd grade. So we also have the advantage of going into teacher mode, so we can jump to different grades. And when students have worked through some of the curriculum, they get to challenge. So the way it's set up that we load a bunch of problems up in the objectives for the first trimester. If students are flying along, like they mentioned, that percentage that they're through more of the year, they have some challenges that they can get into. So our 5th graders, when we were planning for tonight, they were really excited to show, in this one, remind me the name, guys. Big Seed?
Big Seed.
Big Seed. So Big Seed shows up at various grade levels. And what kind of math are you working on with Big Seed?
I What is it? It's like geometry.
Geometry.
Symmetry. Yeah. Yeah.
And what's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish?
To fill in all this space without like going outside of the box, and also like using up all the cubes. So you kind of like click on the screen and then drag it, or you can use these, and then you have to like move them diagonally or like up and down to do it. And then you can click these buttons to change it. So like I just changed this to purple and then moved it.
How does it feel when you get them right?
It feels good. Right?
What did you guys do this afternoon we were practicing? You're cheering.
Oh yeah.
Right? You took a minute because you're up to one of the really, really hard levels, right?
Yeah.
And we're pretty excited to get there.
They're making this look easy. As adults in the classroom, it's really challenging, but they are making this look easy. They've done it.
And pop over too.
They've learned it.
They can hear you, right? So you're just saying that it's,
I have a big
it's really challenging, I know. Make sure the camera can hear. So one of the pieces, too, is the teacher perspective. When we go in and we're helping to coach kids, we haven't seen. There's bazillions of puzzles. So Ms. Fordham was saying that it's really challenging. And the kids, like, fly through and figure them out. And then I'm going to have them share a little bit. Do any of you help each other?
Jack's so Jack's going to help me out by showing me what to...
And if you're
yeah.
in the classroom helping, do you usually grab the computer?
No, you usually like work with your whoever you're helping. Yeah. And then you usually like give them like tiny clues and like you walk them through it, and you don't tell them because then they're not learning.
So it's one of the advantages for us is that we don't have the answers, which for the students, that's not always the case. We often are telling them how to do things and walking through. So it's definitely giving them the opportunity to learn and experience and grow with the math as they get to more challenging, complicated levels. And see the head nods they're getting through all those pieces. All right, let them show you this one more puzzle. Any other student perspectives you guys want to share? You have another thought? No, you didn't. Awesome. You guys are flying along. I don't know if we're going to get them off it now. When we go on at home sometimes, my kiddos will just keep playing and don't want to go on at home. It is optional at home, so students have the opportunity to go on at home, but it is not an expectation. And they actually can only go back and play puzzles that they have played before. They can't make progress. And the idea with that is so that they are not getting frustrated and aggravated, and maybe parents or older siblings maybe aren't feeling the pressure to help them and solve the puzzles. So it's all facilitated learning in the classroom.
Cara?
All right.
I know that when I was talking with Ms. Barnett earlier, she talked about the integration with ST Math and the Eureka Math. I don't know if you would like to comment on that, or if Cara, you'd like to comment, but I think that's an really important piece.
Well, I feel like it gives the kids the foundation and understanding of the math. So they might experience it here without the language piece, so that when they see it with Eureka Math later on, it clicks for them. It really gives them a nice foundation. So it's been awesome in the classroom.
Ms. Barnett, I'd love to just add on that, because I think this is the most important part of this of being supplemental, is that when we're talking about mastery and math concepts, which I know took me a long time at this age, we're talking about oftentimes language, directions, and things being language rich, interfering with the ability of the kids to learn mastery of math concepts. And this is not only particularly important for all kids and appropriate for kids who are particularly younger, but for our special education students and students where English is not their first language, or they don't speak English at all and they have just moved here. They can make incredible progress on mastery on math concepts where typically they'd be frustrated, struggle, only because of the language-rich component to math in general.
Right, it's very accessible to them. It is.
So I appreciate that point.
Right out of the gate.
right. All right. I'm going to have my 5th graders go back and sit. Thank you so much. We're going to pull up the boring part. I said we want to show you how they're playing with it.
Just saying, we think we finally got it.
I know.
As you watch and see. And that's when I was, can you help me? No, I can't help you. I haven't done this puzzle yet. All right, and somewhere I have a clicker. We'll see. So I can, is it pop that way? Either way, the clicker to go through. I'm going to talk this way. Yeah.
Can we applaud those kids?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really fun to go across the district and be in the classrooms and see the enthusiasm. You just see these there's a little ding that we turned off the volume so you can't hear it tonight, but you can hear the little ding as they go through and beat levels, and Gigi makes his way across. And to see the enthusiasm of students across the district is really fun, and to see the facilitation. And hopefully this will actually load. There we go. So you saw a little bit that 3rd grade puzzle that unfortunately is not loading right now. A lot of the puzzles also grow with the students, so it might be a similar puzzle or features that they see in kindergarten, and then a similar puzzle in 1st grade, 2nd grade. The start of 3rd grade has a puzzle, and I think there's a picture in your packet that has dangling shoes and characters along the side. And so they've seen it already in 1st and 2nd grade in terms of addition, subtraction, and counting. And then they incorporate at the start of 3rd grade, they're just getting into multiplication, and it's a really good entry point for them because now they're counting. They can use some of the skills that they've developed in 1st and 2nd grade, but it's actually teaching them multiplication. It's getting at a deeper concept with those same pictures and images. So some of the students, even as they see different levels, watching each other play, they're gain that familiarity. So again, it takes away that kind of scary factor. Oh no, what do I do? I mean, we know the kids are all easily, click on tablets, and they are coming in from a different point than what we experienced as learners. They don't have that fear of clicking and making a mistake, but it just provides that opportunity for them to jump right in early on. So this was some of the many perspectives we got from students. Again, much as our students mentioned, they're really fun games. It's a fun way to learn. They can try it again without erasing. There's no directions to read. They get some postcards, so that's something from ST Math that they send out. There's little postcards for every 10% that they make their way there to track their progress. They have charts to see how they're doing. They like talking to their friends about what they did on level, so although it might seem like it's something they're only doing individually, they really have some conversations amongst the class, either class helpers that are helping their friends, or even at the end, I've seen a lot of teachers do a great job of facilitating those conversations. All right, how many puzzles did you do? What did you learn today? How much progress? Where did you get stuck? And really talking about getting stuck and how they persevere and move on. Again, the teacher perspective, very similar. That student perseverance has been really tremendous with this because it's getting at that productive struggle. Some familiar faces in the pictures. The students facilitating, not just the teachers facilitating and the adults in the room, and really it's a complement. We'll talk a little bit more about that, how it complements Eureka Math. And the data dashboard, that is such an integral part because we get data immediately during, while they're accessing ST Math, and also that night we get some really detailed reports of how much progress they made.
Hi, so I'm Jen Hudak. I'm the new math coach here in North Andover, coming from Beverly, and then prior to that, Lynn, just so you get to know where I'm from. But I've been using ST Math for 4 years, and the power of ST Math is real palpable. As soon as you walk into any school, the GG culture is alive. Kids are persevering. They are using really creative problem solving and critical thinking skills, which is what we're expecting of our mathematicians in the 21st century. So why we love ST Math so much is because it gives the kids that deep foundational understanding of the concepts by showing them visuals. So the students are learning the math by looking at pictures, and then they're able to connect it to the math that they're learning from their teacher in the classroom from the Eureka. So, so it shows deep conceptual understanding. It helps kids get the deep conceptual understanding of math because it starts with visuals. So before they are introduced to any language or symbols or what we call abstract notations, they're looking strictly at visuals. And it's not just one visual. This is one particular visual that we see for place value, but there are different puzzles that teach the same concept many different ways. So students get that repetition and practice with these visuals, and then eventually the visuals transition into the abstract or the numbers and the symbols, as you see on the right. Another great part of ST Math is the personalized learning. The program actually responds to the student's thinking process, and so if they make a mistake, the animation that is shown back to the students reflects what they were thinking, so that the students can watch the animation, learn from it, and go on their own path to mastery of the math content. Another great part of ST Math is the student engagement. I don't have to tell you about that. Just look at these kids. They haven't stopped playing ST Math since they got here. Kids love it. They are intrinsically motivated to get over these hurdles or to finish these objectives or to solve these puzzles. And through that fun gameplay, they're also learning, and they're heavily involved in the math that's happening. And the last piece is the rigor. Again, it's many different puzzles. These are all the different puzzles that students will see to learn addition and subtraction situations. So it's not just a one and done. You're going to try all these different ways and all these different visual representations to try to understand the math content. And for teachers, it's fantastic because they have these facilitation questions that really support the thinking. So teachers aren't here to stand and deliver. They're here to help facilitate the learning in the students. And so their job is to ask those questions. What have you tried so far? What have you noticed? What can we do differently? Let's really get those creative problem-solving skills going and thinking. And so it's a wonderful engagement tool, and when the 5th grade students were talking about how they don't tell the answers, that's what they're doing, is they're using these facilitating questions to help their own peers, which is quite remarkable to hear that mathematical discourse between the students. So now back to a little bit more information about the historical background of the grant. Thanks, Sarah.
All right. So this was a tool we came across a few years ago. As we were looking at adopting Eureka, we knew that it didn't have a computer or any technical piece and component to it. So we started looking into different options. We had heard about ST Math. As always, or typically, it's not cheap. There was a barrier to what that cost was as we started investigating. Luckily, the Math STEM Hub, which is a program of the 1-8 Foundation, was just starting grant opportunities. So we started learning a little bit more and kind of really thought about, why does this work? Why should we include this? We just, are 3 years into Eureka. Why stir up the boat? Why is this working? What are we missing that we might need this? So again, their whole approach is that it's a complement to whatever program you're using. So it fits in with Eureka. It isn't in place of. That Eureka, again, doesn't have that online component. We had heard a lot about the complexity of Eureka. It's so language heavy, it's not always accessible, we need to really break down those terms. So this is a great opportunity, as Dr. Gilligan mentioned, to remove that language and make it more accessible to all of our learners. The data, again, I had heard from different teachers in different districts how important the data was, and that the data was very valuable as a very ongoing, continuous monitoring of how students are achieving different math concepts. So, excuse me, Kittredge, Sargent, and Thompson were awarded the grant the first year, the inaugural year of the program, along with 25 other schools. And then this year, ABCC, Atkinson, and Franklin were awarded in the second cohort. So all of our kindergarten through 5th grade students are all using ST Math. One of the pieces that we learned from our first graders, that some of them were getting onto the computers in kindergarten, and that helped that transition into 1st grade, that they were able, like week 1, hop right on. And again, where that language is removed, they can play right from the start of the year. The grant includes a number of things. Again, in addition to the site license that we get lots of technological support and 3 days of on-site professional development, which typically it's about $2,500. So we get 3 days at all of these 6 schools for 3 years. So it's a pretty remarkable investment just with that support that we have. 2 of our teachers at each school get the trainer certification. So they spend 3 days really getting in-depth knowledge and are trained so that there's going to be ongoing support throughout the life of ST Math. And then a custom implementation plan, which sometimes different programs say, you know, we're going to help you, we'll customize, we'll make it, but they've come on site multiple times through the grant writing process, and every spring we had to sit down for the first year implementation, and then at the end of year one to really plan for year two. So they're really supportive of that. You can see with the chart over 1 year, you know, the cost per school in the district and the savings that we have. So we pay a $3,500 school fee. And that's it. So all of that additional, the site licenses and everything is paid for with that grant. And you can see pretty significant savings over the course of 3 years. Yeah. We're also locked into that $3,500 fee. So it's not like the amount jumps up after the third year, that is the fee that we'll pay unless they make some other arrangements, which it doesn't sound like they're going to be doing. So we've had really good support. At the grant phase, I kind of asked, you know, well, why did you choose ST Math? Why didn't you look at some of the other online programs out there? And they spoke to me that it was really about how it develops the conceptual understanding. There's so many different programs out there. This one has a very different viewpoint. And again, removing that language is so beneficial to our students in seeing all those different visual representations. We mentioned a little bit about the Eureka alignment, so that's something in the planning phase that they do a great job with us of looking at how we've aligned the Eureka units, and the ST Math objectives are lined up right with that. For students, sometimes that's really nice. They might get a preview to a unit if they're a little bit ahead. They might get a review if they haven't reached that objective in ST Math, so it's kind of, again, that double dose of information, seeing it in another way, in another concept. Jen supports, does a great job supporting our teachers, but one of the new pieces this year is creating a champion chatter. So she sends out a little newsletter every Friday to the teachers, giving them that information, and as long as maybe puzzles that really the teachers could dive into. We call it a puzzle talk, where they could do some guided work as a whole class. The reports page we mentioned, so shows a lot of the student in progress. You can see a lot of detail. It shows alerts. You can see number 10 is kind of an alert, letting the teacher know that that student might need a little bit more support. So it's very information right at teachers' fingertips as students are working through. And then within each student, detailed progress report gives a lot of insight of how they're performing on the different puzzles and the progress they're making on all the domains of math. Lastly, I mentioned the professional development. So just to give you a little sneak peek of, or the information around what those different concepts were. So they really worked with each team at each school to map out what it is. Our year two, our cohort 2 schools have the same PD, because that is their standard PD for all year 1 schools. You can see there's slight variations in our PD for Kittredge, Sargent, and Thompson, just kind of choosing what might be a best fit for their teachers at that time. So we're continuing. We have another round, a few schools that they've all had 2 days, and we're working on their 3rd day coming up in the spring. So lots of support from ST Math. Questions?
Awesome. Any questions from the committee?
I'm just going to say, I mean, I think you really drove home a point of eliminating the language piece of it. And I was sitting here thinking, I'm not a Kittredge alum from so many years ago, Mr. Teresi, but
So many years ago.
just, you know, always having the problem of the day, right? I remember going into elementary school and, like, it was written on the board, and you had to kind of figure out, you know, what it was. I think kind of as a teacher did attendance and lunch money and all that stuff, right? But I love the fact that, you know, the kids can go in, it's, you know, independent, there is no language basis there. I really like the analytical program with that. I mean, I think it took me a little while to figure out what the options were for them, because I was like, oh, I would do that different, and then I was like, oh yeah, they got it right, because I like put myself in a corner or something. I don't know. I feel like it was like a Mastermind or whatever that game was when we were kids.
Yes.
But I really like it, and I really want to thank the kids for coming. I know the holidays are tough, and for the families as well. But it's great to see the kids here, and some old teacher friends, and Mr. Cushing as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think we have a little demo from the robotics. I don't know if Mr. Cushing, do you want to intro?
You know, Dr. Gilligan, when you were talking about I'm in earlier and having an assistant, and I remember so many years ago, and I'm not going to name how long ago it was, but we were trying to start a guitar club here, and I couldn't get anyone to help. Now, there were a lot of teachers and everything here who help us, 1 through 5 with the guitar club. But you talk about a student assistant. I just looked over, I saw Erica McMillan. Would you stand up, Erica? Erica, really, come on.
Erica, welcome home, Erica.
It was great. Erica was in middle school and stayed with us right up until her first year in college. So it was really great. So, Erica, thank you. I'll never forget it. Okay. So, anyways, what we're going to do is we have a robotics program that runs here. It runs 1 through 5, but then we also have another component that is a little bit more in depth with programming and coding and things like that, and to actually get robots to do certain missions. And it's a great feeder program into what they're doing at the middle school and then also at the high school. And so we have a couple of our Robo Nights here tonight. Okay, and what they're here to do is to kind of demonstrate what they've done with their robot. And the program that we have that are the Robo Nights, it runs from 3rd grade through 8th grade. So, are you guys ready? All right. Why don't you come on up? Why don't you grab your bots? And we'll kind of do a quick demonstration for everyone.
Who are the Robo Nights?
So let's. What's that? Yes. Well, show yours first, that one, and then show how the race car is kind of, something that evolved from that. Okay? Okay. So first of all, who are you? And what's your name?
Zoe Larkham.
Zoe Larkham? There's just a woman up here speaking about ST Math. Do you know her?
Yes.
Who is she?
My mom.
That's your mom? Oh, she's smart too. Okay, great. And your name, sir? What is your name?
Jackson Teresi.
Jackson Teresi. Are you related to somebody else who actually went to this school years ago?
Daddy.
It was Daddy, yes. Okay, good. So why don't we kind of show... So first of all, Zoe, what's your favorite thing about coming to robotics?
I like to program the bot and figure out how to do the programs, and it kind of gets me a little frustrated when I don't get it right the first time, but then when I try it again, I get better and better at it.
And Zoe, I just remember you with your percentages, and you're trying to use whole numbers, and then what did you have to do?
Use a point.
Points.
Yeah, I had to do 3.5 to get the turn just right, so it didn't do it the whole way turn and didn't get it.
So yes, so you're using we'll call it fancy word decimals.
Yes.
Okay? So that's great. And what about yourself? What do you like about robotics?
I like programming the bots and doing the missions.
And doing the missions, which is great. And I have to just say that, Jackson, what was the one thing that you told me that you thought you would be able to do for us here at the program?
Show the remote control.
You're going to show the remote control today. Okay. So, Zoe, would you like to show one of your programs first?
Yes.
Okay, good. And you can talk about it right here if you wanted, what's going to happen.
It will go straight, then we'll make a turn, then we'll go backwards. And this is supposed to be the swing mission, which will knock a Lego, which will swing, and it will give us 15 points for when we do a competition.
So when we go to competition, everybody knows what the point values are of all the missions. So we don't have the mission set up here, but we do have, her robot in her program. So Zoe, I'm going to tell you, as an impartial judge, I'm giving you 20 points for that.
All right. Way to go, Zoe.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so can you show us what you developed here? So first of all, talk a little bit about your programming. And the other thing I know, Jackson, you told me that you would one day win us a trophy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Good.
Yep.
This is one of my programs. I named it Crazy Kid.
It's called Crazy Kid?
Yep. Oh my God.
Huh? Do you have to move that wire back? So now you discovered something else though about the robot, right? So you developed a program, and now you have another NXT here, right?
Yep.
And what's that going to do for us?
It's going to be the remote control.
Yeah, so all of a sudden he told me, well, Mr. Cushing, I figured out a lot of these missions. And I said, how are you doing that? And you told me you did.
The remote control.
Yeah, remote control. He's supposed to program for every mission, but he had the remote control help him do it. So, can you get it going?
I know. A lot of things going on there.
A lot of batteries.
It's supposed to be connected. I'll use Nate's. It's not really.
Okay, go ahead. Go use the other one.
Quick thinking.
So it's used, so sometimes the Bluetooth does not connect all the time. Plus with the cameras and the lights, we may have a little bit of nerves here. So this is, what is this called, Jackson?
The one for this is called 5-button steel, and this one, the program for this is 5-button remote.
Very good.
You're not going to attack your dad, are you?
It's fast.
And that's through the bot itself has to have a program that is compatible with the remote control. These are third grade students.
That's awesome.
Fantastic.
If I don't say so myself.
What's that?
I said I think it's awesome. If I don't say so.
It is. It's
I might be a
cool.
little biased.
Uh-huh. So I think that's, okay, so I think that's great. You could probably do this all night, right? So any last words you want to say to the school committee about this?
No.
He'll tell me at home.
Do you want to say bye to your dad? No? How about you, Zoe?
No.
So you always have words. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Oh, that's the cute little dude. Gigi.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Nice work from the first, fifth, and third graders. Thank you very much.
Very impressive.
Why don't we take a quick, 2-minute break so people can probably meander. I don't know if they want to stay for the entire meeting, but let's take a quick two-minute break, okay? Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. Next order of business. Anything else in the superintendent's report, Dr. Gillian?
A couple quick things. Number one is I had the opportunity to run into Heidi Waters today. As many of you may know, her and Maureen Ryan kind of head up coordinating our understanding our differences. And they did intellectual disabilities at the Thompson recently, and she was so proud of the work they had done, particularly Zane and Davis, who were juniors at the high school, on the End the R Word campaign. And they, at the Thompson, had created posters for the campaign, which I'll be putting up at central office, and maybe someone like Jack or Zoe or another student can put these together somehow digitally, and we'll put them on the web. So that's number one. Number two is, our leadership team continues to work on the budget. It's budget season. I told another superintendent, I won't name the town, the other day that I was really excited. I love December. And he said, December's fraught with peril, with snow and budgets. And I told him, well, it's still my favorite month after Thanksgiving. And speaking of that, the leadership team's been working really hard. We look forward to presenting a superintendent's recommended budget on the 9th. I know that then there'll be a public hearing, and then a school committee will adopt and send it on to select board, finance committee, and ultimately town meeting. So that's been going really well. And I really want to just wish everyone happy holidays, and in particular today on December 19th. If any of you get a chance, check out WHCH. I think it's Channel 7. I didn't get a chance to get over there today. We were pretty booked with previous commitments, but Shirley Kern is a noon attendant at the Thompson School, and Shirley actually started 25 years ago, and it was a second career when she retired from her first. Shirley worked her last day at the Thompson School today, and she's 91. Wow. And I wish her a happy and healthy retirement. She's certainly a legend there in terms of reading to kids, taking care of kids. She's done a lot of things over the years, and I wish Shirley the best. And I'm not sure if it's on Channel 7. I haven't had a chance to check. But best wishes to Shirley and everyone for a good holiday season if you celebrate, or a good winter break, and a happy and healthy 2020. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gilligan. Next order of business is going to be Mr. McDevitt talking about the fundraising subcommittee update. Are we doing slides on this too, or are we just going with the packet?
We can do slides, but I don't know if they're going to be able to see them at home. That's my only...
Oh,
Are they the same ones that are linked on the agenda?
we're not connected. All right, so we're not doing...
Okay, all right. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
So we went through the fundraising subcommittee, and really our goal was to dive in and really understand how different clubs and activities and teams were doing fundraising. And so the data is a little difficult to kind of go through. For most, I keep pulling this closer because I feel like it should be, but most of the equipment most of the fundraising was really for equipment and gear, banquets, coaches, and trips. And we're going to get in, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And if you guys have any questions as we go through, feel free to interrupt me. So the fundraising committee was myself, Dr. Mealy, Mr. Jackson, principal of the high school, George Gonzalez from the middle school, Laura Habacker, the AD from the high school, Lisa Razanin, who is the girls varsity soccer coach, teacher at the high school and a math chair, and also the union president, Sean Daly, who's a policeman in town, but also very involved with the Booster organization, and Suzanne Egan from town council. And we met about 6 to 8 times, probably from, I'd say, Jim, like March or so up until about 2-3 weeks ago. Okay, it's hard, I can't see you, Jim, so I keep like, all right, there we go. So as we went through, we wanted to look at what we were doing and what policies we had and kind of what was out there. We approved about 2 years ago the policy for crowdsourcing, and that the fact that it had to be approved by the building principal with kind of the superintendent having the last authority in terms of approving that. It was something that I think the coaches and advisors were not necessarily refreshed with, and a number of them kind of didn't know that. So we kind of brought that out to some additional attention. As we went through and we looked at student accounts, we went through, I think, Jim, it was 3 years, and we had some teams and accounts that were pretty out of date. We had old advisors that were associated to them. We had people who hadn't been employees of the North Andover in name only, being recognized as just kind of the person of that account. And so that was really kind of a housekeeping type of issue that we had to go through. But the bigger thing was really kind of looking at the number of specifically teams that had no activity in their accounts. So as we went through, there was really no money coming in, no money going out, but a general knowledge and understanding that they were doing some fundraising and obviously spending some funds as well. as we started to look at the coaching positions that were in the contract and the assistant coaching positions, we started to realize that there were a number of them that were not in the contract that were currently being paid. And so they were being paid some through community programs, some through basically it could be a booster club that was kind of sending the money over to the coaches, and some were being paid in other ways as well. If you remember, and actually maybe none of you were here except for perhaps Mr. Limpert, we used to have some booster club organizations who would come through and would make donations to the school committee for anything over $1,000 or more. So some of our teams would come through and they would make a donation that would pay for half a dozen coaches over the course of the year or so. So, any questions so far?
Mr. McDevitt, you're doing a nice
Yes.
job, and I just want to point out that it is linked to the agenda.
Yes.
So folks can see it.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So we looked into a couple of different things with the fundraising and how they were doing. We know that some of them were doing crowdsourcing, they were doing camps, they were doing the coupon book. So you might have bought a little flyer or an app that's associated to that. There were raffles that were being done. They were doing soup sales, so the organization gets basically a couple of dollars for every bag of soup, and then something was also donated to another organization as well. I think it's well known that the track team does the mattress fundraiser in the spring, and that's a great night. A number of restaurants also support our teams and our activities through typically like a 10% night. So you might have Fuddruckers or Casablanca or Jamie's, for example, who, you bring in a flyer and, 10% of the night sales within a certain hour range goes over to the team for that. So a lot of variety of what they were doing out there. So any questions so far? All right. So now we're going to get into some of the interesting stuff. So as we went through and we started to look at what was being paid to coaches. So we went through the contract and we went through each of the teams that had assistant coaches outside of the contract. And we know of at least $36,300 paid to coaches that's not included in the contract.
So,
Yep.
can I ask, so what you're saying in the, what contract do we mean?
The teacher's contract. So
Okay.
the teacher's contract contains the parameters based upon tiers for all of the programs and what assistants are there. It could
So,
be an
like-
assistant band director, it could be an assistant JV coach for whatever team it was.
Okay.
But these aren't individual contracts for individual coaches, right? This is the
The teacher's contract,
Right.
all encompassing. Yep. That represents about 27 different coaches. So out of that $36,000, we could see activity in the student activity accounts of about $17,200 that was paid from there. So give you an example, a team might do a fundraiser. They have a deposit of, let's say, $5,000, and then as a line item expense, they would pay the assistant coach $2,500, $3,000. Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Who would authorize that?
That,
I'm sure it varies from student activities account to account, but generally speaking.
it would goes through the high school. I don't know exactly who signs off on that. Mr. Mealy, or Dr. Mealy, I'm sorry, do you remember?
For the student activity account payments, they are approved by the high school principal, and then I sign the checks.
Okay.
As well as there's activity accounts at all the schools.
All the schools, yep, good point. So $19,100, just under $20,000 of coaches are being paid not through the student activities accounts. So there's really, to be a little bit blunt, there's no taxes that are being taken out of it. There's no possibility for retirement compensation for that. And it's really just I hate to say it, it's off the books completely, okay? The other thing that we found and identified were stipends were very inconsistent across different sports. So we might have a team that has a JV coach and they might pay that coach $3,000, and then another team has a JV coach and they might pay them $2,500 or $2,000. So it was really all over the place in terms of where that fell. There were some teams that basically self-identified that, you know, their intention was to pay coaches and didn't. So we know of at least one, if not more, coach that basically volunteered their time, which is okay to volunteer, but it was something that was out there. So, yes.
Were there discrepancies within the sport, too, between boys and girls?
I don't remember seeing that. But it was, I'll say you might have one team that paid, you know, might have 40, 50 kids on it. That's probably a lot, but, you know, let's say 30, and they might pay their assistant coach $3,000, and another team with pretty equal numbers pay $2,500.
And again, I heard you say that this includes like music and art and drama and all that stuff. The word coaches makes us think of sports, and I think we probably have more sports than we have of the other things. But I just want to emphasize again that this is not just sports.
Correct. The one difference is for most of the things in terms of what I would call the fine arts, there aren't necessarily assistants that are being paid kind of outside of that we saw.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just thinking about marching season, and I know we have, you know, visual text, and we have, you know, text for all different, you know, sections. You know, you have a percussion tech, and you have a, you know, a brass tech, and I believe that they all get some sort of stipend through NAMA.
They may. Not through student activities accounts.
I see. That's helpful.
Okay.
So that's interesting too, isn't it? I mean, that gives us another layer of unknowns.
Unknowns, correct. Very good question. Yes, Mrs. Mason.
And related, so you're saying there are different inconsistent stipends. Whoever comes up with the number in the first place, is it the coach that comes up with it?
Good question. So I'm going to try to remember, but I think about 6 years ago, when we negotiated the contract with the teachers, the coaching stipends were really all over the place. There were automatic renewal. I shouldn't say automatic renewals, but if a coach remained the coach a subsequent year, there was an automatic increase in pay for that, and that went through. So Mrs. Burzlaff and I don't remember exactly who from the union went through and really tried to categorize the positions into tiers. And I think, if I remember correctly, we have 7 or 8 different tiers that are there based upon things like risk, participation, student, number participation, and really tried to kind of put them into buckets with that. So they're not, the assistants are not consistent with all of that. And there are also some that were paid inconsistent with the contract. So we might have one assistant coach in the contract who's paid, I'll make this up, $2,000, and then we pay that coach $1,800. Because that might be what they could have fundraised for. Dr. Mealy? You're leaning like you have a question. I don't know if it's just the table.
So I can hear.
Oh, okay, all right.
Well, I'll move my head then.
Perfect. All right. So one of the things that was actually difficult as we went through this was really looking at all of the funds that go in and out of the student activity accounts. It's hard to decipher exactly what is truly fundraising and versus some of the other things that are there. So, for example, the music program may do a trip out to LA for a festival or something like that. All of the students are paying into the account for things like plane tickets and hotels and to cover the cost of those things. So there's a lot of money that's going into that, but it's a direct expense that's kind of coming out. The class of 2020, et cetera, obviously has a significant number of funds that, for proms and dances and just activities that they're doing, fueled by their dues and some fundraising, but the expenses really kind of help to offset that. So when we looked through that, it looked like there was about, in this year, and again, or I shouldn't say this year, this past year, credits of about $140,000, debits of about $150,000. Now you might look at that and quickly think like, well, running at a loss, right? Not necessarily. It could be that they had money left over from a prior year and they spent a little bit more this year than they did in a subsequent year. And then as we look through, and I apologize for the number on this, I think it when it got converted over into a Google format, it threw the numbers off a little bit. It looked like from fundraising that we had tracking of, there was just under $40,000 that was benefited, the activities, so $39,683, and fundraising expenses of just about $8,100. So really about a $31,000 profit in terms of fundraising. Does that make sense so far? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I would really be lacking, I think, if I didn't take a couple of minutes and just recognize specifically on the athletic side of this, and I know Mrs. Picard will probably be angry because I won't have the music side of this.
I won't be angry, I'll just be curious.
Yes, but the North Andover Athletic Association has truly been a very strong partner in terms of helping to support different things, and so if you take a look at the annual chart there, they really help to support a number of different things in terms of banners and upkeeps, record boards, kind of all throughout our schools. I know I was at the middle school the other day. The wrestling boards are up there even at the lower grades. Rotating mats at the high school. I think they have a life cycle of only so many years and only so many pins that they're allowed or something, and a number of scholarships that go out as well. And I think on an annual basis, they tend to do about 4 with that. They also have a number of different kind of one-time contributions that they've made to us as well. So if you take a look at, if you drive by, there's obviously windscreens that are there, there's heart AED devices that are more readily available, safety covers. If you look at the baseball fields, those kind of orangey piping that goes around so nobody gets a stabbed arm as they're going for a fly ball. Shooting machines, cheerleading mats, different equipment in terms of softball and patches and banners and things of that nature. So just some great things that are kind of out there that the North Andover Athletic Association has really helped to kind of participate and donate to the schools. So any questions so far on that? Okay. So a couple of different things that we kind of came up with in terms of some recommendations, some findings, some thoughts of where we were. The fundraising form to kind of basically say that they were going to request to do a fundraiser just needed some updating. Nothing major. One of the things that was kind of added in was that the form was actually complete, or the fundraiser was completed, and a marker and an indicator of the profit that was associated to that as well. I think beforehand there was kind of we were going to approve this fundraiser, but there wasn't necessarily the information kind of coming back saying, how many Yankee candles did we sell in order to make our pieces that are out there. Really an understanding and a notification that, all funds have to be in a student activity account. I'm not saying, we don't know where funds are. I'm not saying there's anything inappropriate with them, but they all have to be deposited into our accounts. We can't have accounts we really run outside of the school department. And then, there were fundraising that was being done, or potential for fundraising to be done, that was not necessarily approved and going through the process. So really making sure that the principal of whatever the school was, primarily this is the high school, any fundraising that occurs at the younger grades is typically PTO organized. The department chair or director or the athletic director with that. And we really wanted to help identify whether or not things were school-sponsored or non-school sponsored events that were there. I'm not saying, people don't, somebody comes on your doorstep and, is selling candy bars or something. I don't think a lot of people really ask a lot, but we really wanted to make sure that any flyers or anything that was out there really kind of designated the fact that it was from the North Andover schools. As opposed to some booster club or organization within town. Mr. Picard, you look like you have a question, or you're just pensive?
Well, I'm
A little bit of both.
stuck. Yeah, really. I'm stuck up at number 2, all funds and student accounts, and I'm thinking about so PTOs are their own 501c3s. So would they do things through student accounts, or would they do things through their own accounts? And same thing with Booster Club or NAMA or some of these other supporting organizations that are not actually school organizations and that do their own, tax reporting and all that stuff. I mean, you've been untangling a big knot here, so.
There's a lot that's there, and I think your question's really good. Obviously the PTOs have, their own kind of accounts and all things of that nature. I think where it gets to be a little bit more challenging is, when they're buying something or doing something for the schools, that it's coming back in through a donation.
Right.
And so that is coming in, and that is in part being recognized for that. The other thing is, we know that organizations kind of are there to be supportive of our faculty and our students, but when we have faculty members who are the potential to be handling funds, that needs to be coming into the student activities accounts.
Absolutely.
Is that fair, Dr. Mealy? I keep wanting to say Dr. Mealy, I'm sorry. Mr. Mealy, Dr. Mealy.
Anyway,
Jimmy.
so I was going to add that 2 and 4 are really connected. What we want to make sure is there's clear delineation.
Yeah.
If it's a school fundraiser or a school-sponsored event, then it should be connected to a student activity account, and the money should go in. It should be approved, and then the money comes in, and then the approval is made to the expense out. If we're successful because of the organizations that help us, but when they're raising the money, it should be clear that they're raising it, and they are going to have responsibility for the money and whatever happens with it. So those two are connected.
Yep.
Thank
Good clarification. Dr. Gilligan?
I wanted to say this, Mr. McDevitt. You have been, I'm not sure how many years on the school committee now, but quite some time.
Yep.
And you've been through a few contract negotiations, the IBB you've been a part of. And I know that you've worked extensively on a stipend committee. And that's a lot of work, and you guys did a lot of great work cleaning that up last time with the tiers. And I think ultimately, it seems like districts all around the region, they have to revisit this every couple of years, because you have the stipends in the contract, and is that fair? Making sure we have all those, and you guys have done a really good job with that. But more importantly, in terms of the fundraising, we wouldn't survive as a community without the generosity of, I would say NAAA and NAMA just as an example, but there are other folks, like Terry Holland and the Xanacases and that do things. And ultimately, we have tremendous volunteer coaches. They volunteer, they get quarried, they do all the appropriate stuff, and then possibly later a booster club might say, well, they were a volunteer coach and would like to do X for them. And I think what you've raised is a really good point, and Dr. Mealy's talked about this before, is, if there's a school-sponsored fundraising event, let's make sure it's in the school activities account, and there's the approvals. But more importantly, even more so, is some of these outside groups have been the lifeblood of keeping us afloat and alive. But if they're going to, get something, then it's important too, is that reminder of going through the school committee to donate that. And I think that every time it's revisited in North Andover, that it's good, and then I think it's something you have to keep an eye on because those outside organizations do so much, and then it might taper off after a few years that we might not see them. And I would just say, last but not least, I really appreciate the fundraising aspect. I'm not sure we can keep up. I don't think towns and cities have kept up with the technology. You know, what used to be me going door to door now, knocking on the door to sell a candy bar, might now be something where you send an email to somebody,
Right.
And they have to do X, Y, and Z. So that crowdsourcing piece is something that they worked really hard on. I think it was just maybe 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago.
2.
Yeah, I was thinking it was
Yeah,
less
we
than
were
that.
nowhere
like maybe
near.
2.
Less than-
Oh, so
Yeah.
it was 2 years ago.
Policy was like a year and a half.
I remember I was the
Yeah.
assistant superintendent, so when we were looking at it, and I think that also clarifying that is really important because these things do change. And I think Andover just went through something similar. So I think just getting, if someone from those wonderful outside groups makes a donation or they want to be involved in something about supporting a coach, that it goes through the proper channels. And then the activities too, but also the fundraising. And this is a perfect timing in terms of stipends and contracts being a bargaining year.
Yep. So that
Thank
actually,
you.
yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that we need to look at as we go into IBB, and Dr. Gilligan really queued it up, is, we went through a process of cleaning up the stipends for these. And I don't think we did anything with them last year. We may have adjusted some monetary amounts or something, if I remember correctly. But I think we need to review all of the positions that are out there. And I think we need to recognize that just because a position is in the contract does not necessarily mean we are funding it. And so, we could have, for example, and I'll just make this up, an assistant track coach that's there, but it doesn't mean that, we're going to have 6 or 8 or 10 of them that are there. And the last piece, and Dr. Mealy may want to speak a little bit about this, but, there needs to be a little bit more of a policies and procedure manual for coaches. And I know that he's been kind of working on that in terms of what are we doing with this, right? I mean, we've got coaches need to be reminded of, updates or changes with the policies that occur. I don't think all of them, for example, were aware of crowdsourcing, right, and that they needed specific approval for it. That all funds kind of needed to be in the student activities accounts. And so, again, you had, the possibility of coaches or parents within the team that were kind of handling funds that were there. And all that really needs to be brought into the school activity accounts. So, thoughts?
I want to echo what Dr. Gilligan said in that this is something that does have to happen in every district every few years. And I appreciate Mr. McDevitt's leadership in the subcommittee in getting it done this time around. Basically what happens, and there's no question that the intent is good, and it's appreciated. Our participation increases in all of our activities, and it becomes necessary for extra help. And oftentimes it starts as volunteering, but then people realize that somebody's putting in a lot of time, they should be compensated for this. But what happens is they don't understand, they don't realize that a lot of this is done by our teachers, and if it's in the contract, then it could be eligible for the pension, their pension. And so we have a responsibility every few years to make sure that the form is proper, that the policies and procedures are being followed, that the staff is educated on that, and that the fundraising process is as it should be, and that all of our coaches and all of our assistants and advisors, all of those positions are captured so that they'll be eligible. If they are eligible, they'll be available for our staff.
No, I think that's important, and I think having everything again in the student activities account just creates a very fair level of transparency. And we know that it's there. We know, we understand exactly what's being spent, how the money is being spent. And so I think that's really where where we need to go. I think one of the things that, I just want to go back if we can, probably about maybe the third, fourth slide. I'm just going to kind of say this a little bit, somewhat as a parent and a member of the town and the community. But I'm looking at the page here on the coaches and the stipend thing that's there. $36,000 worth of stipends were paid for really by fundraising efforts by our students. And I think that we as a committee really have a responsibility to kind of think of that and take a look at that. I'll never disagree that, academics are, number one, and athletics certainly contribute to that. But I think that amount of time that some of these students are necessarily taking to fundraise, $40,000 to pay coaches, I have fundamentally a problem with that. So I will be looking to kind of see what we can do with that, but I don't think anybody realized when these kids were fundraising the amount that was, I hate to say going to adults, but really going to adults and coaches, and not going to T-shirts or bags or a trip or a banquet or something of that nature.
Well, and that number is very questionable, right? So, I mean, it could be that those coaches, should have been paid. I mean, if that's 27 coaches at $36,000, they may not be getting the compensation that's parity for what they deserve according to the contract.
Yep.
So that number of what those coaches should be getting could be even bigger.
Right.
So if we are looking at numbers that we should be considering, we need the right number to be looking at.
Sure.
But to be clear, though, that money that's getting paid to coaches, that's over and above what they're entitled to through the contract, isn't it?
No. So, for example, you may have a coach, and I'll use the girls soccer program in part because Lisa was on the committee. You may have and I have the numbers here, I can pull them up, but we have a varsity coach and we may have 2 assistant coaches and a freshman coach, okay? But she may be using 2 additional coaches that are outside of the contract and paying them because of the students, the volume of the students that are on the team.
But when that happens, that needs sign off by the AD and the principal, right?
When it's paid out of the student activity accounts, that's true.
If it goes through the student activities accounts, Dr. Mealy, then it is.
Well,
but there are plenty of cases where it is not.
I'm not gonna put you on the spot. Is the goal to come up with a more firm policy on that? Because that to go into the point that Dr. Mealy made about people, that could impact people's retirement and their pensions. I mean, do you think a policy is going to be derived from all? I mean, this is a lot of good work. Thank you again, Andrew, for doing it.
No, it's no problem. I mean, oddly, it was fun. I do think that as we look to the policies and procedure manual that I know Dr. Mealy is working on, that's fine. I do think we probably need to look at some of the policies to be sure that they're covering everything, but. I mean, it is our policy that funds should be deposited into student activities accounts, and I'll say that there are teams that have not deposited a penny.
Which means that they're fundraising and they're spending it, but they're never processing it through.
Correct.
Is what you're saying.
So, or it's coming from an outside organization that's not donating it to the school committee, which is
I see what you're saying.
more likely. And I think, believe it or not, I think the work that whoever did it last time, and I'm not sure if it was you, Andrew, actually with something like soccer, the reason that they actually identified those people is so that it would be on the books and appropriate. And that was a great first step. But I think it's really clear, I think, that figuring out, okay, you got a really good person who's a volunteer coach, and if there's a 501(c) that raises some money and they have a banquet at Fuddruckers and think that, oh, it'd be nice for them to get $200 or $400, they could give it to them and the school might not even know.
Right.
as a result of that, and that, whether it's under 1,000 or not, whatever our policy says, it either should come in through donations or through the student activities. And then more importantly, I think we have coaches in the region, it's a little different here than a lot of places across the country, that don't work for the system.
That's what I was gonna ask.
That they're not teachers by trade, and there's a lot of, I know, internal mechanisms and the audits we have with the CPAs and all them around, for example, like a class advisor in their group. But, when you start getting groups that are really keeping us afloat as outside organizations, we just got to make sure that, if we don't see someone coming through the school committee to donate it, but we gained a sense through looking at this, that someone has getting some compensation.
Right.
It's a really awesome idea. It's really good, but it also would help us keep track of equity. It would help us keep track of making sure that everyone's on the same page. And more importantly, for the folks who coach for us that don't work as teachers or in the system, I think it's important. And then for the others who may, not realize it's pensionable or.
Right.
So do you know, Andrew, out of those 27 coaches, how many are not employed by the North Andover School Department?
I do not. I'd have to go back.
It seemed like
through that.
quite a few were.
Yeah, if I had to say, I'd say the majority were probably North Andover Public Schools employees.
Okay.
So it wouldn't take a lot to make it work and be consistent with our policies and procedures. The positions and how they're funded are independent of each other. So as long as we identify all the positions and include them in the contract and set the rate that position should be paid at, most of them would be funded through the operating budget. But if somebody needs an extra assistant football coach or assistant band director or whatever it might be, they can get approval for that. And then if the funding wasn't in the operating budget, they would get the approval with the understanding that this is how we're going to get the money, whether it's through the student activity account or an organization is going to raise the money and then donate the money to the school district to pay that. It could all work. It's just we need to tighten it up.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the things that conceivably scares me a little bit about that is, we might say, I guess we'd have to be careful about the numbers that we put in there, right? So, we have a varsity coach, we may have a JV coach, and we may have a freshman coach, and then, that there's assistants that are there. And if we were to put in, for example, one assistant for each of the levels, but JV needed 2 for something, right? Like setting the precedent that, and I know all coaches are yearly appointments or yearly positions, that doing it once 1 year and, then the expectation is that it's automatically in the budget or it's automatically dependent upon an outside group kind of donating those funds. So, I think it's a bigger conversation in terms of how are we funding them, but we know, there's almost 30 coaches that we need in order to support our activities that we are not budgeting for.
So I guess just to conclude, is there a next step with this, or is it just making sure that these folks are paid accordingly? And
So there's a couple of next steps. One, I was already working on updating our financial policies and procedures, so this will be included in that. It will come to the school committee for approval, and then we're going to work with the athletic director and the high school principal to make sure that advisors and coaches are aware of these policies and procedures.
Okay.
And then during negotiations, obviously, we'll have discussions about the positions that need to be in there.
Yep.
sounds good. Again, thank you, Andrew, for your work. Appreciate
No
it.
problem. Any other questions?
I have one more question.
Sure.
In your conversations, did you have conversations about gift policies and those sorts of ethics? Because if you're getting a coaching stipend that's outside of the contract, and that could put a teacher at risk.
So there is actually a policy, I forget the number or the letter, for gift policies, but I think it is $50.
It is.
Per calendar year.
Per calendar year, yeah.
So these folks need to know not to put themselves at risk as well.
That would be a fair statement.
Good point, Helen. Thank you.
I would just say thank you. This is complex work, and I know of another town that had just done it. And just when you think you get caught up, all out of good intent, but you, Dr. Mealy, I know Ms. Rassinen and some others, it all ties together with policies, procedures, but also coming up, the bargaining for our 3-year contract.
Timing is good.
The stipend positions, and I would just say this, in a budget last year of $50.5 million, when we're talking about the programs that are most impactful for all of our kids in North Andover for their lives, whether it's music, whether it's art, or whether it's sports, and I'm probably missing a few. It's a lot of bang for their buck, and we're lucky to have folks in North Andover that are supportive.
Absolutely.
I think Ms. Mably has one last question.
Just a comment, an observation of a parent getting my door knocked on for years and also having kids fundraise. As you do your manual and policies, guidelines, it would be really helpful, I think, 2 things. To make sure that the students always know what the money is going to go toward that they're fundraising for. And maybe it's for a coach, maybe it's for new uniforms, maybe it's whatever, but they often don't know what it's for. And it would be really important that that needs to be known. And secondly, and I'm sure this is already there, but to make sure it's there, that coaches, I know anybody who's fundraising, you set a bar, a goal for kids, a target. We want you to sell 15 coupon books. We want you to sell 4 bags of soup or whatever. But that's an encouragement, and that's a suggestion. You can never mandate
True.
a volume, and if you don't, then you still have to cough up the money. I think that's got to be made super clear that while it's an encouragement, you cannot mandate a kid to fundraise.
Well, interesting, Mrs. Mably, it's very clearly spelled out in our policy for students who are traveling, that there is not a mandate for fundraising, but any other fundraising does not have that, which is interesting.
I do think we have to be careful, because I don't want kids to think that, oh, if I don't hit my 20, I have to make my mom and dad and me cough up the difference. So
Right.
I just would make sure that's super spelled out.
But I think that we need to be mindful of our students and our community as well. And there are some that, may not wish to sell.
Right.
Or may not be able to sell. And there are
Or
other
buy.
ways that they may be beneficial to the organization. So, for example, they may volunteer to do something, and those hours count instead of fundraising. So, they may, Mrs. Picard's looking at me funny, but, they may volunteer at a camp, right? So some of the kids, may do some of that in lieu of having an obligation. I shouldn't say an obligation, it's in lieu of fundraising that's out there.
I'm looking at you funny because we're charging activity fees and requiring people to fundraise. That feels not right to me.
That feels not right to many of us.
That's when you get more money in the budget for next year. Okay, absolutely right. Old business, second reading, approval of therapy dog policy. Any changes to this, Dr. Gilligan?
No, I'd just say that Suzanne Egan was planning to come tonight, and if you had any additional questions, unfortunately something came up where she couldn't make it. So if you had any additional questions beyond tonight, we could certainly move it to another meeting.
Is this change, the only change, the onto school property? Is
That was there the last time.
That was?
I put that in when I looked at it before the first time.
Okay. I don't have any further questions from the members? Are people prepared to vote on this tonight?
Yes.
Could I get a motion to accept the therapy dog policy as presented in the packet?
I'll move that we accept the therapy dog policy as presented in the packet.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Ms. Lynch, seconded by Mr. McDevitt. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, so that's a 5-0 vote. Thank you. Second reading, overnight trip to MASC Student Council Conference.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the MASC Student Council Conference trip as presented and discussed last time.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion made by AM, seconded by AM. How's that?
Very exciting
I
every
know.
time you say it.
Isn't it great? Isn't that great? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It's a 5-0. Can I say Hawaii? I just go to Hawaii.
No,
Can't say that?
it's very cheesy.
Very cheesy. Okay.
Book 'em, Dano?
Book 'em, Dana. All right, so that's approved 5-0. Second reading of the FY21 budget directives. We've kind of beat this to death for the last 6 weeks. Any further discussion on this?
I
Well,
think
first, let's can I get a motion to put on the floor first?
Make a motion to approve the budget directives as presented.
I'll second that.
I won't say it. Motion made by Ms. Mably, seconded by Mr. McDevitt. Any further discussion?
I think we should strike the last
I was
bullet
just gonna
that
say,
says
I'd like
other,
to
that
take
was
other
for our
out.
discussion, and doesn't need to be,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay.
Anything else?
I was gonna say the same.
Ms., I think that's just a typo. I don't think we need to really get into an amendment on that, but other is not really important on that.
Mr. Gary will take care of that.
I know she will. Okay, anything besides other? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That's a 5-0 vote as well. Okay, why don't you bring the bad news, Dr. Gilligan, on the MSBA?
Yeah, so we recently just heard from the MSBA that we haven't been invited to the program again this year for the expansion at the North Andover Middle School. I had met this afternoon for about an hour and a half with Town Manager Melissa Rodriguez, and we discussed, what do we do moving forward? Because this has been an ongoing discussion that we've had. We know that we have some of the highest class size in the region, and definitely out of the top 20 comparables identified many years ago by the school committee, with 24.6 kids, 24.5 kids, and the median of those communities is about 19.6. So, they're critical needs. I met with the town manager, and Dr. Mealy's been very instrumental in this. But they've agreed on the town side and working with Dr. Mealy to put the middle school in as part of also Facilities Master Plan 2 as another option to look at how to best meet the needs we have in North Andover. As highlighted last time and when we brought forward the revised strategic plan, we also have a small superintendent's advisory committee that will be nimble and agile, that will look at a myriad of different options, across the district about how we can best gain space, because we certainly every year have operational needs, but a lot of those operational needs, particularly around class size or expanded course offerings, et cetera, require space. And we want to make sure that those needs drive the spaces that we need. The town manager is committed to working with us on that as part of Facilities Master Plan 2. And as discussed in that strategic plan, and with Dr. Mealy's input, I believe he spoke quite a bit at the last meeting, or a little bit anyway. We'll look at all the different options, and I'll bring it forward to you and the stakeholders so that we can have a discussion about how do we proceed to go forward, because every year we have operational needs, and if class size at the elementary or the middle school has to be tackled, space is a big determinant on our ability to do so. So I look forward to continue to work on that. Of course, we'll continue to work with the MSBA. We'll continue to refile. I think each year it's, I don't go to casinos, but like roulette is mutually exclusive each spin, right? And each year, it could be read 10 times in a row, and you might think, oh boy, it's been read 10 times in a row, so it's can't be read again. But each spin's separate, and each year in the MSBA is mutually exclusive. I believe I read the other day, as this information has trickled out, that I think there were 11 projects accepted total across the entire Commonwealth, which is not a ton, but we will continue to apply. I do know that Dr. Mealy has connected with the MSBA, as I have in the past. They say it's nothing personal against North Andover. We have an excellent application. They made suggestions for the last one. We will meet with them again to refile. But certainly at this time, we have needs, and we need to explore those other options. I'm glad the town manager is very enthusiastic about working with us to identify what those mean and need, because it's beyond the point of just starting a conversation about it now.
Right.
It's time to develop
Right.
a long-range plan of how we're going to meet capital needs for space in North Andover.
I think that's very well said. Thank you, Dr. Gilligan. Dr. Mealy, could you just maybe explain for people who don't, obviously there's a few people, I know the one person in the audience knows, but if anyone's listening at home, how Facilities Master Plan 2 works and how that gets funded, and where does it fit into like a time frame and stuff like that?
Sure. Wow. So, having been involved from the start of Phase 1, I can tell you that a consultant is hired, and the RFQ went out, and we have 2 firms coming in on January 6th for interviews who will be the consultant leading up the committee, with whoever will be on that committee, of formulating the timeline and plan for Phase 2. And basically what happens is the projects, most people know what those projects are. They include 3 elementary renovations, the middle school addition/renovation, and the renovation to the fire station. Could be another 1 or 2 projects identified as well, but those are the ones we know about right now. There'll be priorities set by the committee of what order to put those in, and then each town meeting will approve the design of a project and the construction of a project. And that's how we go through the years. And it will be about I would say in this case, from now, completion of those projects would probably be 7 years from now.
And that's a town committee?
It's a town committee, right. We'll have school representation on that committee, but it's a town committee, yes.
Okay. Any questions for Andrew?
I have a quick question. So I think this is our 3rd time that we've applied and not been accepted. So obviously we're going to apply again. I don't know logistically if we could ever do this, but is there any preference given to a new construction project versus a renovation? I don't know if we have the ability even to do that, but are they approving new projects and not approving renovations? Do we know that?
They tell us that it's based on need.
Okay.
And so while they agreed that our need was there and we did a good job presenting our need, that there are greater needs across the state that they need to address now.
There have been a lot of headlines about crumbling schools, for instance,
Yeah.
rat infestations, et cetera.
Bad
Yeah.
bathrooms in Boston. Like bees there.
I think the Leahy in Lawrence just got approved, was it last year? I mean, it might have been built in 1900, 1905.
And then Pentucket just got approved last year, and they applied 5 different times, Andrew. So it takes some time. It's a limited pool of money. It's like the old days when you just got on the list and eventually you get your money back.
Yeah, I don't even know if, hypothetically, if we could build a brand new one, right? Like, I don't even know where it would go, but like, does building new have a better ranking?
So I'll ask Jim this secondly, but I can't speak to the 11 projects because I don't know enough about them. But one of the advantages each year when they're mutually exclusive is, say, for example, there's 10 projects and 7 of them are full schools being built. It appeared, just looking over the list over the history of the years, that sometimes it's good having a smaller project because there's a certain amount of money that's been allocated to MSBA to say, okay, let's pick up this now. This is a need. The other question of the factor is what has surprised me the most, and I'm not in construction. Dr. Mealy is our finance guru, but what really surprises me is 2004 doesn't seem like a really long time ago to me. I know it is, but we built North Andover High School, which is, it's a flagship school. It's a property that people comment on how wonderful it is, and in 2004, including the turf fields and everything, I think it came in under budget, and it was probably like $53, $54, $55 million total. And what surprises me is when I look out, and I know there are stretch codes, and I know there are all sorts of new rules, and I know there's inflation and cost of labor and materials. But when you look at, I think Somerville High School, for example, was
like $200 million.
It was well over that. It was I think it's 1,200 kids, and I think it was $286 million. I don't want to be held to that number, but I'm really surprised at the cost of what new schools are.
Right.
Jim?
Yeah, so here would be the challenge, is the fact that their standard for us was to prove that the existing middle school is in good enough shape to add to it instead of building another school. And we did a good job of showing that we've kept it up, and it does need some renovation, and it could use some additional space, but it's in good shape. So then to try to come back and say,
catch-22.
we need a new school,
Right. No,
would be
no,
different.
I get what you're saying. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Dr.
Thanks.
Gilligan, you mentioned a superintendent's advisory committee. Can you tell us anything about the makeup of that committee? Is it?
We talked about this at the last meeting.
Right.
So it's part of the strategic
Remind
plan.
me.
So it's a school committee subcommittee would be a group that's put together by the school committee.
Right.
And this would just be, in addition to all the formalities of what Dr. Maley mentioned in terms of going forward with the facilities master plan too. And Jim, what do we call those? Feasibility studies and all those different things. It would be a smaller group just figuring out like, okay, there's no bad option. It's a little bit like interest-based bargaining.
I just mean who?
Oh.
What kinds of peoples?
Well, it'd probably be a smaller group to start with, some of the folks within the district and our team. We might try to get another perspective. But that small group then would go to a larger group of stakeholders, probably involve more people, maybe then make it a subcommittee or have a larger public discourse on it. It's really about the idea of creating people that know our facilities really well with creative ideas. What might some of those options be?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gilligan and Dr. Maley. Okay, back to Dr. Maley. Budget, FY20 budget status report.
So we're in kind of a holding pattern with our budget. It hasn't changed a lot, as you can see. Still anticipating the same additional expenses and budget gap of 175 right now. Could change for the next report. We do have a couple of possibilities in special education, particularly some 45-day placements that could turn into out-of-district placements. We'll bring that forward if it does happen. But so for right now, we haven't really changed our projection for the year.
Okay. Any questions on the budget status report from the committee? Thank you, Jim. New business, first reading community programs budget adjustment. This also Dr. Maley?
Yes. So this is a little earlier than we usually do this. This is based on activity that Rick sees. He's confident that this is going to be accurate for the year and we wouldn't have to come back again. So we figured we would do it now. So basically increase programs and enrollment, generate additional revenue, but also additional expenses for the staff and the materials. In addition, he also is doing a one-time purchase of some staff computers that needed to be replaced. So you can see we're looking to approve the budget as presented on the right. That's the FY20 adjusted budget for the rest of this year.
So it's
And I have the reasons for each in the right-hand column.
So it's not an increase in any of the cost of the programs. It's really just updating budget allocations.
Correct. It's
Okay.
it's participation in meeting the needs of that, but no increased fees or anything.
Okay, that's what I thought.
We're just getting more participation, therefore generating more revenue.
Correct.
And so you need to spend more money there.
Well, I just want to say, my kids participate in a lot of, whether it's Kid Stop or you can see robotics. They do a great job, Rick and his whole team. I mean, they communicate. There was a medical incident here last week, and just like within the half hour, you get an email. It's really impressive, and the wide variety of programs that we offer our kids is amazing. And I'm sure it's always been like that, but now that my kids are getting a little older, it's really amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. They report to me, and I couldn't be more fortunate to have somebody like Rick and the people that work for him running community programs. We get nothing but accolades for the work that they do.
And from my perspective, I mean, both Rick Lott and Rick Mormon, from a person who, mission, passion, whatever, is inclusivity, like you couldn't ask for a better person to be on a team of wanting to create just such an inclusive environment. He's great.
Yeah, definitely.
I would just say, I mean, I'm going to respectfully, I think, disagree with you, Mr. Tracy. I mean, it hasn't always been this way. I mean, when my oldest is a sophomore, and when he started, I mean, the programs that were offered they were great, they were awesome, but the listing of them was small.
Right, I agree.
The trust and the growth of those programs has been unbelievable. The success, kids love the programs. I mean, they add more stuff every year. And I'm disagreeing with you in a nice way.
Yeah, absolutely. I got it. Not angry.
Not yet. But I mean, they just continue to grow this, and I think it really speaks to the staff and the community's just trust in what they're doing there. But it's great. I agree on that.
Thanks.
I know we're running out of time, but you're bringing up partnerships. Could I have 1 minute, Mr. Tracy?
I have no choice, right? Can I get the clock going, though? Go ahead. Good.
You talk about partnerships. You talk about Rick Gallant and community programs, you know, although it does fall into the school and Dr. Mealy. Just remarkable that you look at other communities and they're saying, like, why can't we have this type of after-school programming? And then you talk about kids who may need breakfast, they can't get it at home. And Rick working with Erica Murphy Gallant and creating breakfast and getting it for kids who qualify for a free breakfast in the morning as part of Breakfast Club. Remarkable. Rick Gorman, the Memorandum of Understanding, the expansion of summer programming. Remarkable. I got to say, I don't hear this a lot in other communities. Chief Gray reached out to me more recently and said, we would love it if you guys would, we partner with you already, but we would love it if you could work with us and provide some basic understanding and training around kids with special education needs. So as we encounter them in the community, we're better equipped and prepared to understand where people are coming from, which I think is remarkable. Last year we brought DCF here, and this is the most heartwarming story of the year for me. I don't get sentimental often, I almost cried. There are folks like Don Stewart in town, who was a longtime selectman. I think Don fostered 70-plus kids in this community. But this is a community where we didn't have a lot of foster families. So if for a particular reason one of our students finds themselves in a position where they have to go into the foster system, there might not be anything local where they might have to go to Lowell, for example. Nothing wrong with Lowell, but we've got to send a bus to go get them. We've got to bring them back here. And in terms of folks having to go into systems like that, it's typically not for a great experience happening within the household. So the more consistency we can keep, the better. So DCF came in and presented to you about partnering on us, about trying to create, spread information and get more info to folks in North Andover to consider fostering. And just out of the blue the other day, I opened an email from a parent, and maybe I'll have her come in. I don't want to identify her and her husband just yet. And she said, Dr. Gilligan, you may not remember me, but a few years back, your son was on my son's baseball team. And we didn't see the school committee presentation, but we saw it in the newsletter. It's a poster on the front door of your office, and we want to let you know that we've been thinking about doing this for a long time, but we took the plunge, and now we're fostering a kid. And that's going to make all the difference in the world of those kids, but kids in North Andover. So those partnerships are amazing. And just one last thing I'll add is, back to our teachers, our coaches, our advisors, and whether it's music or anything else. As a former coach, believe me, no one gets rich from a coaching stipend. I think the joke used to be it's like 10 cents an hour. But I have never seen something that across all of New England, schools, communities spend so little on, and the payback for all the kids learn, the life lessons, the friendships, the bonds, learning how to work as a team, develop a work ethic, and some of those things you could argue are just as valuable, if not more so, in terms of them being successful in life. And I really applaud our coaches, not only our coaches, we don't even know what we call them, advisors, staff that support music, and then more importantly, like the parents. I mean, there are more parents. Like when I see the band parents, like I remember Brian Gross used to be on the committee here, like driving box trucks. I mean, the organization and what they give back, and they do it for free. is just, it's life-changing for our kids, and we're lucky to have them. I just wanted to say it. So,
Well said, Greg. Thank you. Public comment? Nope, nothing out there, nothing in the audience. From the members, anything?
I just want to add one thing.
Oh, sorry, Marcy.
Sorry, this afternoon we were on the topic of inclusion. We were lucky enough to be visited by some Franklin School students with Deb Swenson and Mr. Clark riding the bus, and Amanda Smith, the SLP, coming with us, and their paraprofessionals. And students came over from our RISE program, which is one of our programs for autistic students, and delivered us some wonderful gifts and had some snacks with us. And it was a really, really great experience. I spent a lot of time at Franklin the last time I was there. Deb and I had some conversation. I'm like, let's have them visit. Let's get students out of the building. So I'm not always visiting them here, but let them visit me at my home. So it was a great experience, great for the kids and better for us. So I want to thank them for coming over, and Mr. Clark getting the bus and getting them all over here.
That's excellent.
Yeah, it was a
That's
fun
right,
day.
Marcy. Thank you. Amy, anything? Down that way? Andrew?
I do, just a little shout out, if you will. I mean, this is obviously a time of giving, and we've talked a lot about the benefits of this community. And I would love for them to come and present this to the school committee if you choose. But 3 individuals, and I'm sure that there's more, but I'll certainly call them out. But Kathleen Pease, who's a nurse at the middle school, Deborah Foley, who's a teaching assistant, and MB Law, I think I'm saying her name correctly, who recently retired. They really kind of spearheaded a program at the middle school that I think is just fantastic. And it's the Knight's Closet. And it's really just a program and an opportunity for kids who may not have clothing to come to school, or the necessities that they may need, to be able to go to walk in and walk out with a sweatshirt or walk out with a pair of boots. And I think we think of ourselves as a very affluent community in certain pockets, and there are definitely places where we know we have kids who have some true needs, and I really think we should recognize these individuals for not just seeing and understanding that there's a need, but they didn't ask anything from us in terms of doing this except for space, and they have gathered all of this. I don't even know what to call it, but just service to give to our students really for free, and it's unbelievable that we have these kids who can come to school and just leave with something that will keep them warm, it's fashionable, and helps them come to school. And we know, there's statistics that are out there that, if kids don't have clothing or the right types of clothing or things of that nature, they are less likely to want to come to school and be engaged. And I really think we need to commend these people for thinking outside the box and just not thinking about it, but doing it.
Nice to maybe get them on the agenda for the 9th or the 16th, maybe to come in and talk about that and recognize them.
there's quite a few other folks too.
I know. I
I mean not
3.
on your list that trying to get here tonight, but I mean it's just untold. I mean the PE teacher at the Atkinson has a shoe rack for gently used shoes for kids that they take home. I mean the list is endless. So Dr. Mailey and Ms. Marks and Ms. Bacuzzi, maybe we can try to even gather quantify all these things we do, like Mr. McDevitt did tonight with NAAA, for example, because it's remarkable.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. Lunch, I think so.
Everybody has a great break.
Helen?
So I went to Understanding Our Differences at Thompson when Zane and Davis were presenting, and they asked me to come back to you and offer their encouragement and their gratitude for the inclusive programs that we have, particularly Best Buddies. Everybody can be or have or Best Buddy. Everybody can compete or help with Special Olympics, and everybody can compete or help with Wrestle Olympics and Unified sports. So they were really terrific in their presentation. The students were amazing in their engagement, and those 2 students asked me to let you all know.
Excellent.
Thank you, Helen. And just in closing, I want to thank again Mr. Cushing and the Kittredge School staff and teachers for coming tonight. I think you know, in the last couple of years, we've been to most of the elementary schools. May have one or two more to get to. Something nice to do to get on and listen to the kids talk about their programs, what they're learning about, and just interaction. I think reminds us why we all ran for office to start with. It's the kids and what they're learning. So I know I appreciate it, and obviously it was nice to see my kid up here as well. So, anyways, I want to wish everyone happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We're back here on January 9th. Oh, can I mention to adjourn? I'm sorry.
I motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Mably, second by Mr. McDevitt. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, no. That is
Aye.
happening.
Thank you.